Good evening. Welcome to the Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy Public Meeting. We'll just hold on here for a few minutes until we get everybody online. Thank you. Okay, I'll just give us about 30 more seconds here. I'm not really seeing our attendee list increase, so we'll just give it a few more seconds and then I'll get started. Okay, welcome again, everyone. My name is Marlene Wagner. I'm going to start our meeting by just going over some guidelines and etiquette that you're probably used to at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and read through the list. So upon joining the virtual meeting, your microphone will be muted automatically. In case of any technical issues encountered during the meeting, please notify us in the chat and we will help you. Please note that the chat will only be monitored for technical assistance. Public comments are welcome and encouraged, and it will be rotated between attendees. To ask a question or make a comment, please use your device's raise hand feature. If you're on the phone, dial *9 on Zoom. And if using a computer, click the hand reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. During the comment period, the host will enable you to unmute yourself. You can then unmute yourself by pressing the mute button on your device or dialing *6 on your phone. Keep discussions focused on the agenda items and questions at hand. Offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity, personal attacks, threats, or insults towards individuals, governments, or organizations is strictly prohibited. Assume positive intentions from those speaking and listen respectfully. To ensure a balanced discussion, limit your comments to 3 minutes with one clarifying follow-up question. Provide constructive feedback regarding the fisheries in which you participate. And remember that the most compelling comments are those that pertain to the topics under discussion. So staff may close public comment to stay on schedule or to provide others who still need to comment with an opportunity to speak. This meeting will be recorded and posted online. If you have further questions or comments, please submit them in written format on our public comment webpage, and the link is listed here. Okay, so again, good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene Wagner, and I am the South Coast Policy Lead for the agency. I'm here with Mike Sharp, our fish biologist for Grays Harbor Basin. We have a few other staff hanging out in the background, including Kim Figler-Barnes, our Grays Harbor area biologist, and Kyle Addix, the intergovernmental salmon manager. We're here tonight to review and discuss ongoing policy revisions for the Fish and Wildlife Commission's Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy. So the process so far, in June of this year, we briefed the Fish Committee of the Fish and Wildlife Commission with an overview of the Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy. At this meeting, we provided a summary of both its purpose and performance. We explored the recent and current status of the 6 Grays Harbor salmon stocks. We discussed the origin of escapement goals for these stocks, most of which were created in the 70s and 80s, with the exception of the 2 fall Chinook stocks, which were updated in 2014. We reviewed the previous policy language and offered some staff recommended policy revisions. And the outcome of that meeting was that we received direction from the Fish Committee to provide a markup strike-through document with proposed policy language for these revisions. In August, we went back in front of the Fish Committee and also the full Fish and Wildlife Commission to present the policy markup strike-through document. At this time, the Fish and Wildlife Commission voted to approve the draft document for public review. All the materials for these meetings are available on the agency website to study, and the links to find them are posted here on this slide. We opened public comment on August 13th with an announcement through an email on the Grays Harbor distribution list and a press release directing interested parties to provide their thoughts through a public comment portal also available on the agency website. So as of this afternoon, we've received 9 comments in total. Many comments are not applicable to the policy itself. So before we get into the meat and bones of the Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy, I wanted to take just a moment to talk about what a policy is intended to do and how that differs from a fish management plan. So, I mean, these topics are related, but the policy is a document designed to evolve occasionally if needed when circumstances change. So the Fish and Wildlife Commission can always come back, revisiting the policy and making revisions as necessary. And the policy sets boundaries for behavior and performance, ensuring consistency while remaining adaptable. And the policy, it's supposed to be high level and concise and not really delve into technical specifics. And really, it's updated infrequently and only as new issues arise. So a Grays Harbor Annual Fishery Management Plan, on the other hand, provides a plan that's done in light of this policy and provides for year-to-year flexibility. So in our annual fishery management plans that are developed in concert with Quinault Indian Nation and during the North of Falcon process, we take a lot of public comment, and this provides the framework for the upcoming season, such as number of fish and a daily limit. And in Grays Harbor, we create a new fishery management plan every year. So some things that are outside of the scope of the Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy include marine mammal management. So this falls under the federal scope of NOAA's Marine Mammal Protection Act. Also, specific regulations such as a limit on jacks or other particulars, these are addressed during the extensive North of Falcon process we undergo every spring and become a part of the annual fishery management plan. Culvert replacement, it's a really big current topic, and that lies under the auspices of a federal court order. Hatchery production, it's covered under a different agency policy, the Anadromous Salmon and Steelhead Hatchery Policy, or C-3624. So just a broad overview of the policy itself. The Grays Harbor Basin Salmon Management Policy was put into effect by the Commission in 2014. It expired last year on December 30th, 2023. The policy provided both general and prescriptive management objectives and guidance for WDFW managed salmon fisheries within the Grays Harbor Basin, which is including Chehalis and Hump Tulip Rivers, and Marine Area 22. So every year under this policy, the management of Grays Harbor salmon fisheries are integrated with the North of Falcon and the Pacific Fisheries Management Council processes, and staff adhere to the terms set forth in the US v. Washington case through collaboration with our treaty co-managers, the Quinault Indian Nation. Forecasted salmon abundances are estimated and mutually agreed to, and this establishes the base for salmon management and determines the number of fish available for harvest. So additionally, Grays Harbor staff collaborate with the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation to discuss forecasts and to provide a state share of harvest in the fishery management plan. So now I'll just kind of provide a brief overview of our 6 Grays Harbor salmon stocks. I'll start with natural origin spring Chinook. So the figure on your right is a line graph showing the run size in gray and escapement in black from years 2010 to 2024. The shaded area shows the years since policy implementation, and the horizontal green dashed line depicts the escapement goal for the stock. The blue dot is distinguished from other data points as this is the estimated forecast for the upcoming year. So you can see that the stock declined from 2014 to 2019. This spurred management action to stop fishing in 2018. And so the following years appear kind of as one line because the escapement and run size really mostly overlap. There's been a recent increase in returns, but this population does remain highly variable. The escapement goal of 1,400 was created sometime before 1984, but its origin is unknown and likely habitat-based. Next up are natural origin hump tulips and Chehalis fall Chinook. We chose 2010 as the starting point for all figures, as that is the first year of a full brood return of mass marked hatchery fall Chinook. The hump tulips population has remained fairly stable since policy implementation, but it did experience a decline in 2023. Although this year we do have a forecasted return just over the escapement goal. This population's escapement goal was reevaluated and updated in 2014, and it did increase from 2,236 fish to 3,573 fish. For Chehalis fall Chinook, you can see that they exhibit a highly variable return throughout the years. The Chehalis fall Chinook escapement goal was also reevaluated and updated in 2014. And it was changed from 12,364 fish to 9,753 fish. Moving along here, we have our natural origin hump tulips and Chehalis coho. So we saw a big decline in coho stocks starting in 2015. Coho stocks actually declined across Washington state and really throughout much of their range at this time. And this was really likely due to abnormally high ocean temperatures that limited the availability of preferred food. And this is often referred to, you've probably heard of it, called the blob. Our natural origin hump tulips coho trends show this pattern of decline starting in 2015. Numbers do appear to be increasing a bit, but our 2024 forecast is below our 2022 numbers. You'll notice that the data points for 2023 are missing, and that's just because we're still working on this technical work with our co-managers. The current escapement goal for natural origin hump tulips coho is 6,894 fish. This goal was also created in the late 70s and is habitat-based. For Chehalis coho, it also took a dive in 2015 that may be attributed to the ocean conditions I was just speaking about. We're seeing Chehalis coho increase in numbers in recent years, though. Again, 2023 numbers are not shown as this work is still ongoing. The escapement goal of 28,506 for natural origin Chehalis coho was created in the late 70s and is habitat-based. Natural origin Grace Harbor chum is next on the docket. This stock has been increasing quite a bit since 2020, and our 2024 forecast is showing some decrease in returns since 22 and 23, but numbers still remain relatively high. The escapement goal for this stock was created in the 70s, and it was based on a relationship between commercial catches in both coastal bays and a Willapa Bay escapement goal. Okay, so that's the end of our stocks. And next, I'm just going to kind of go through some policy performance and policy revision thoughts. So as far as the performance of Grace Harbor salmon management policy, we've really learned a lot since 2014 when the policy was first implemented. And so kind of taking these lessons into account, here are some of the items that we're really interested in improving during the policy revision process. And so the first thing is that the original policy creation and inception didn't involve any co-manager input. The original guiding principle 8 stated that WDFW managed commercial gillnet fisheries shall be scheduled if possible, so that in any given calendar week, there are a minimum of 3 consecutive days when no treaty or state-managed commercial fisheries occur. And it's really proven difficult to schedule a meaningful non-treaty commercial schedule when considering both treaty and non-treaty sectors within this constraint. And so based on the structure of the treaty and fishing schedule, confining this 3-4 rule to a calendar week, it really ties our hands. And so new draft policy language aims to provide a more equitable opportunity for bay fisheries. There are also prescriptive restrictions on commercial fishery impact rates that are based on an analysis using old data from 2008 to 2012 and the pre-2014 adjusted fall Chinook escapement goal. So these have been removed from the draft language. Furthermore, the allocation and impact rates expressed in the policy between marine and freshwater recreational fisheries, these were based more on public input and not conservation or harvest-based needs. And so these have also been removed from the draft language. And listed on this slide is a very broad overview of the revision approach for the new draft policy. So we really intended to replicate the commission's approach from the new Willapa Bay salmon management policy in the new Grace Harbor policy. So this would be focusing on an objective section that emphasizes conservation and sustainable fisheries management while providing adaptability. We wanted to provide managers with the flexibility needed to achieve those objectives, like based on defensible science and up-to-date data. This includes completing management strategy evaluations for stocks, which are designed to assess alternative harvest control rules and ensure that appropriate escapement goals are in place. We also sought to remove outdated and prescriptive language to enable adaptive management, allowing strategies to be adjusted by managers based on new information and changing conditions. And so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and I am going to pull up the draft language document. Are we looking at the draft document at this point?
No, there's nothing up on the screen right now, Marlene.
Thank you. Give me just one moment. How about now?
We can see it now.
Oh, great. So we're looking at the draft version of the policy?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry for that delay. So I know everyone here has read through the policy, but I wanted to take just a small amount of time to go over the actual language for sort of the aforementioned points of interest. And I'll start with the purpose section. The purpose section has been rewritten to be clear and concise. And so consistent with our approach to Willapa Bay, it includes both natural and hatchery origin fish, and it explicitly states the 3 species of salmon present in the Grace Harbor Basin. I'm going to scroll down to the policy objective section. So this newly added policy objective section provides concise statements for future outcomes in the basin. And so these include productive natural spawning populations that are locally adapted, diverse genetically to maintain adaptability, and occur in densities appropriate for the local environment. 2, sustainable fishing levels for both recreational and commercial fisheries that maximize harvest opportunities. And 3, management actions associated with harvest, hatchery production, and natural origin escapement adhere to ecosystem-based management principles that consider the risks and benefits to species and habitats within the Grays Harbor Basin system, including vulnerabilities to a changing climate. We've moved the adaptive management section from the bottom of the policy to up top to emphasize its importance. And the guidance section of the policy really just is the kind of meat and bones that offers direction for the management of salmon fisheries. It's closely aligned with the structure of the updated Willapa Bay salmon management policy. And so right up top, the number one principle in the management of Grays Harbor Basin salmon is to promote conservation by managing fisheries consistent with conservation objectives that were listed above. I'm going to scroll down to number 7. So guidance number 7 directs the department to to schedule recreational and DFW managed commercial fisheries to reduce conflicts related to gear and other fishery activities. So state managed commercial fisheries will be scheduled with the recognition of the importance of incorporating net-free days to ensure regular unobstructed passage for salmon into freshwater habitats. And so this is where we've removed the 4-3 rule that we discussed earlier to promote flexible seasons based on forecasts with the understanding of the importance of unhindered fish passage windows. And guidance number 8 is really what discusses kind of harvest management for Grays Harbor salmon. I'm going to scroll down to 8D. So guidance 8D directs WDFW to conduct management strategy evaluations to update escapement goals for all salmon stocks while managing to existing goals until that work is accomplished. And so those goals are stated here for each stock. And the revised policy moves the fisheries and species-specific management section here to 8E. And we really condensed this section to be parsimonious and to be clear and concise. This section describes fisheries management direction intended to meet conservation objectives. And this involves structuring fisheries to promote fair sharing across sectors and locations. It includes an impact rate of no more than 5% when the forecasted returns exceed escapement goals by less than 10%. All species are to be managed to escapement goals, and the state commercial fishery will be managed to incidental harvest only of fall Chinook. And with that, I will transition back to the presentation to review the timeline for the policy revision process. Okay, are we looking back at our presentation?
Yes, it's not in presentation mode. We're looking at the whole screen, but yes,
Oh,
we
thank
are.
you. Thanks. There we go.
Perfect. Looks great.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, onward to our timeline. Okay, so again, like I mentioned up top, we met with the Fish Committee both in June and August, and the Fish and Wildlife Commission in August. We were given approval to put the draft policy language out for public comment. And here we are today on September 4th for our public meeting to collect your thoughts on policy revisions. So the comment period remains open after our meeting tonight until September 15th. Later in the month, September 26th to 28th, we'll be in front of the commission again to provide a briefing on this public comment. There'll also be an opportunity at that time for the public to comment directly on this topic to the commission. And then in October, we hope to come back to the commission for a final decision on the policy. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. And so before we open the floor, I'd just like to remind everybody that we're really keen to hear from you. The link to the public comment portal is here again for you to use. If you're not on our Grays Harbor distribution list but would like to be, please email graysharbor@dfw.wa.gov and we will add you. And there are links here both to the expired policy and the new draft Grays Harbor policy. And so with that, I'd like to bring Mike Sharp up to the panel and we'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to raise your hand, the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen works well. I don't see any hands so far. Okay, we have our first hand from Bob. Bob, go ahead.
Hey, could you just please put the last slide you just had up? It was cut off, so I couldn't see all the emails and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Thanks. That was all I had right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. We do have a small group tonight. There's only 8 of you in the audience, but right now there is no other hands. So if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them.
Must have been such a well-delivered presentation that you pretty much answered all of the questions. Nice job.
Okay, I see a hand pop up from phone number ending in 793. Go ahead. You can unmute.
This is Andy, and I would just like to agree with the policy. Sounds good to me. I like the revisions that were made, and I would hope that we could get this through in a timely manner and not end up on a long timeline like the Willapa policy did. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. And we have a hand from Patrick. Patrick, go ahead.
Hi, I literally just got on here a couple minutes ago. Can you just go over with me? Is there any major changes that I need to, or we need to be aware about? I'm kind of late to the party, got tied up with some family stuff.
I think I can answer that. What we did was kind of condensed everything. There were a lot of prescriptive things in there that said we're going to meet X% for this place, X% for that place, and 4-3 within a calendar week. We took those languages and we kind of condensed it into more of a directive. Hey, instead of a 4-3 within a calendar week, we are being directed to provide opportunity for unobstructed passage. There's other language in there that basically says that we will be managing for all of the sectors for equal opportunity. Maybe, yeah. So basically, it is taking a lot of what was already in the policy and condense it into kind of a more concise directive, if that helps. So no major changes, it just removing some of the prescriptive language that was sometimes very difficult to follow. I mean, 74% freshwater Chinook impacts and 28 coho impacts was almost impossible to achieve. So those things were removed with just some clear language to say that these are the things we would do, but just in simple language.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mike. I'll look over it some more, and if I got any questions, I'll reach out to you.
And do remember, it is the 15th is when the public comment date ends. So you still have 11 days.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. Again, if you have any comments or questions, the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Could also be a smiley face tab that says reactions. Bob's hand's back up. Bob, go ahead.
Mike, I haven't been super involved in this, but I was just curious. I was looking over all the charts and everything, and I know it's not necessarily policy there, but noticing that you reduced the escapement numbers on Falls Chinook for the Chehalis system. Was there a reason why that was done, or?
So and this even goes back before 2014. And part of the bigger not North of Falcon, but Pacific Fishery Management Council and Pacific Salmon Treaty, a lot of the escapement goals that they look at are biologically based as opposed to habitat based. And so the Quinaults and WDFW had worked for years to develop a biologically based, so basically an MSY based escapement goal. And we came to an agreement in 2014 and presented it to those that oversee Pacific PFMC and Pacific Salmon Treaty salmon management groups, and presented what we pulled together, and they agreed with it. And so basically it took the data that the escapement data, the harvest data, and basically did an analysis that said, this is what this habitat is producing. These are the runs that are coming back. This is the productivity. And basically it adjusted what was actually occurring. And what we were seeing was in the hump tulip side, we were actually seeing a higher escapement than what the old goal was saying. And in the Chehalis, it was actually a little bit lower than what we typically see. Yeah, and it fluctuated from year to year, but it basically says, based on the Ricker curve and all of those wonderful analysis of MSY, these were the numbers that was produced. And so that is how those numbers kind of dropped down a little bit. So it went away from that habitat based, probably 1980 something or even earlier, spawning pairs per mile of an escapement goal that used to be there to something that the international management community agrees with.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Bob. We have a hand up from Mara. Mara, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marlene and Mike. The language and the way that you have reframed this policy is very clear, and I think it reads very well. I actually want to follow up a bit. I didn't on what Mike, what you were just talking about, habitat based versus biological based escapement goals. And Marlene, you were sort of pointing out in your initial presentation which species had escapement goals that were based on maximum sustainable yield and kind of the fish biology, and which ones were based on habitat. And I was curious on the direction with which the department was planning to take that additional evaluation of escapement goals, because that looks like that's part of the policy. And Mike, if I understood your comment just there, you're moving toward biologically based escapement goals. Is that correct?
That is what the international community has focused on. We haven't gotten too deep into how we're going to move forward, but what we do understand is that these are some pretty old goals, and all of them need updated. And Spring Chinook Fall Chinook was the one that had been recently done. So we haven't made any determination yet as to which way we should go, but it's this policy is going to direct us to put in that effort. So hopefully we won't be able to sweep it under the table and say, oh, we'll get to it later. It's going to force our hands to get it done. So I wish I could answer the question of, is it going to be a habitat based analysis, or is it going to be a biological based? at this
Yeah.
point.
Thank you. Do I have time to follow up there, Leah?
Yeah, you're the last hand we have, so go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. So maybe in anticipation of future discussion, biological-based escapement goals are based on the biology of the past, and we are looking at and in terms of like what we're looking at is the biology of the future. And to that, I would say that that habitat restoration in the Chehalis Basin has opened up literally hundreds of miles of new habitat for salmon, and particularly coho salmon, of all the species that you're presenting here. That's something that's dynamic, that has changed over time, that wouldn't necessarily be reflected in the MSY evaluation. And then the second piece, which is part of the policy, is doing this in light of climate change. And that's sort of the opposite of all this culvert barrier removal. It's the shrinkage of habitat over time due to increasing or decreasing summer flows and sort of decreasing summer habitat. So the ability of the basin to support salmon is dynamic and it's changing. And I would just ask that sort of as the conversations of escapement goals go forward, that those kinds of issues be part of the conversation, just as a sort of a few thoughts there. Thank you.
Very good points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. And that was our last hand for right now. Oh yeah, sorry, Marlene. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for that, Mara and Mike. I can add a little more context if that's okay. So the management strategy evaluation, you know, we've hired a scientist who's specifically kind of doing that. That's Jan Oberger, who's working a lot with Thomas Burens and likely others for sure. But I think the approach is sort of you know, an integrated population model and you know, various covert. I mean, I don't think the path is fully laid out, but they're working on an R package for this actually. And so, you know, certain covariates can be involved in the model, I think, and then it is projected forward. And so, if that isn't something that you've been tracking, there's actually a really great talk that Jan did. I believe it was a lunchtime seminar, but it's on YouTube. And it kind of talks about this process. And so we've kind of already started getting the data together for Willapa Bay. And I know, I hope that's helpful, but these are things that people are considering. That's all I got.
Sorry for cutting you off there earlier, Marlene.
That was my fault. Thank you.
And I see a thank you from Mara in the chat. We have another hand up from Bob. Bob, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm kind of, like I said, I'll late to the game a little bit too. I'll read through the whole management plan, but I just had a question regarding Grays Harbor and stuff, particularly the Chehalis system. There's somewhere in the management plan that talks about the increase of, you know, with managing salmon, with the increase of predation regarding northern pike minnow and the bass that have kind of really exploded in there over the last, you know, few years. And I know that Washington DFW has been doing a kind of a study on the effects of what those bass are doing in there, but I haven't actually seen any results from that yet. So is there somewhere in the plan that's talking about that? Because I mean, having a management plan going forward without addressing those bass and that northern pike minnow population that seems to be exploding is kind of, no, I don't want to say mute, but it's should be a part of the plan if there's not a piece in there. And I just was curious if there is one.
So I can take this. Within the policy itself, that is something that probably shouldn't be within the policy. Other plans and things that we do would be addressing that. And you're correct that we do have staff out there that are looking at assessing the population of bass, and hopefully we can move forward with even doing some sort of evaluation on impacts. We know that bass have been in the Chehalis River since probably the 30s. I think we have documentation that they've been there since the 30s. But with climate change and everything else that's going on, it's going to be an increasing concern. For the policy itself, that's probably something that won't be in there, but we will address that in other situations. And again, even in a management plan, which we update every year based on our forecasted abundance, we probably wouldn't have that so much in a management plan for fishery management. But again, other documents will be covering some of that stuff.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. So I think that might have been the last hand. Just a reminder, the smiley face on the bottom or the hand, depending on the level of Zoom you're running. Oh, also just an update for the few of you that are on here. Zoom's going to be updating at the end of the month. And if you're not running the most recent version, it'll make you update to the most recent version before you can join a meeting. I got an email about it. So just an update for anybody who's on here and plans to join Zoom meetings in the future. But Marlene, I think we're probably good.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Mike. And really, thank you to everybody who came tonight. We're really happy to be here and talk with you about these things. I just want to make another plea to please, if you have any thoughts, please use our public comment portal and share them with us before the public comment period ends on September 15th. And again, if you are not on our distribution list, you may join by emailing us at graceharbor@dfw.wa.gov. And we're always around to just, get a phone call or an email with any questions. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we're so glad you made it tonight, and have a very nice evening.